Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Safe System Assessment course. My name's Ken Beer. I'll introduce myself in a little bit and we'll introduce Loretta. Yeah, we are recording the session. Now we record that so you can go back and watch any of the particular case studies or information and rewatch it. Or if you have to miss a session, you can watch the recording, catch up with the recording. Loretta will talk a little bit more about that shortly. I'll provide a little content warning here. That's simply saying we show some road crash scenes to try to understand, well, what's contributed to this crash, what's contributed to the severity of it, and how do we look at altering the road and roadside environment or other features to try to lessen the chance of it happening or the severity of it. But if that's something that could disturb you, I just wanted to flag that now that we will do that. Nothing overly graphic though. Right, let's hear from Loretta, and Loretta will introduce herself, but also tell you a little bit about how you can interact in these sessions.
Thank you, Ken. So I am Loretta, training coordinator at Safe System Solutions. So I'll be here sort of in the back end, moderating and helping out with questions. But most importantly, you would have received a lot of emails from the training team. If you have any technical issues or anything like that, first thing I always say is log out, log back in, restart, see how that goes. But you do have all the details that we sent on an email. But any admin-based questions, the best email contact there is training@safesystemsolutions.com.au. In regards to the webinar sessions, as you may have heard at the start, it is a webinar, so it's not a meeting, which means we cannot see you and we cannot hear you. So the best thing to do is to use the chat function. So there's two ways you can sort of interact. There's the chat and Q&A. So if it's a question, we say use the Q&A so we can, raise that with the presenters. And the chat function there, if Ken, he may ask you some questions to get involved in the sessions, then use that chat function to answer whatever has been asked and just communicate with each other in that chat. But yeah, as I mentioned, yeah, it is a webinar, but if you did want to talk, you can raise your hand. So if you wanted to sort of say something, you can raise your hand and we can then allow you to actually speak. The other thing, yeah, as I mentioned, if your tech fails, there are PDF slides. So the Learning Management System, the LMS, is what you would have received an email. If not, check your junk folders because sometimes it does go in there. But we do have the presentation as a PDF that you can download from the LMS. So I will cover the LMS in further detail later on at the end of the session. But as I said, if you haven't received any info on the LMS, check your junk folder. You would have received a login email, but otherwise just shout out and I'll help you out in the back end.
Thank you.
That's all from me.
Yeah, any questions, any comments, that's your email address. Oh, I just crossed it out, did I? Oh,
Meow.
I'm struggling. Let's make sure you can see that because yeah, anything in admin, logistics, management of the course, just email through to that. They're very, very helpful. And yeah, with the chat to everyone, it's a good way to do that. We don't get to have those lunchtime meet and chat about stuff. So we do it in the background on the chat. Learning management system, you mentioned that, Loretta. Explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so you have to have access to this because you need to, complete all the course criteria through this system. So we pop in their quizzes, there'll be quizzes, and every day we'll go through each module and tell you what you need to do to complete that module. There's assignments in there as well throughout the course. So there is an 80% pass mark, so you do need to ensure that you do get that 80% mark. But I know Ken will give you all the right information so that you don't fail. But yeah, we've got a really good team that will help out if you need assistance with assignments and things. But yeah, log in. I do see that some people have logged in already, but yeah, we'll go through that in further detail later.
you. And as mentioned before, my name's Ken Beer. I'm the Principal Engineer at Safe System Solutions. My contact details there. So I'll run the content of the course. I've been doing safe system assessments for a while now, quite a while now, and doing lots of road safety audits in my career as well. And I used to work for Victorian government for quite a while, and now at Safe System Solutions. And my colleague Max McArdle will present some of the course, and his details are there as well. He'll introduce himself when he comes in. Okay, we've got a few little things, little tricks to try to keep you engaged. We know it's tempting on the online courses to do the emails or to finish off that roundabout design or whatever it is that you're up to, but we've got a few things. So first one is Wally the Wombat. So what is going to happen throughout each module, and we talk about a module as each sort of day that you log in, the 2-hour modules, a number of these warning signs will appear on the slides, and you've got to keep track of how many you see. And that will be one of the questions in the quiz or the tests at the end of the session. So that's not one, that's just a sample one. It may be smaller than that, maybe put around the slide somewhere. So keep an eye out and count the number of Wallies. Wally count is currently 0. Another little thing we do to try to keep you engaged there is to give out some prizes. And as Loretta mentioned, I'll give you prizes if you answer questions I ask. So you're first to answer correctly, or first, or one of the ones that I really like. If you ask a really good question, you're volunteering for case studies or the like as we go through. And Loretta asks some trivia questions before each session. So if you log in about 3 minutes early, Loretta will be asking just some, it could be random general knowledge trivia, it could be road trivia, whatever it is, and you're a chance to win a few prizes from the get-go. And tell me about these prizes, Loretta. Well,
they're just behind me. Yeah, stuffed toys. So you'll get a stuffed toy delivered to you. But no, that's a joke. So we will send you prizes. So I'll keep track of who wins prizes in the back end. And once you've successfully completed the course, we'll actually post it to you through snail mail, but you will get a prize from Safe System Solutions.
Okay, thank you. You sort of paused for me a little bit there. I don't know if it was for others, but yes, prizes. They won't be stuffed toys. They will be something though, and you'll get them in the mail. So get involved in the course and you can win some prizes. Okay, so they're the incentivizing ways to keep you engaged in the course. Now, a few more stick type ways to do it. We require you, so we have some minimum sort of competency requirements from different jurisdictions who endorse the course and accept the course. You've got to turn up to 4 out of the 5 live webinars. And certainly view that one, the recording of it, if you can't attend. Now, if you can't make more than, you've got to miss more than one, get in contact with that training at Safe System Solutions email. You've got to complete all set tasks. So we have quizzes, exercises, assignments, site visits, and reports and the like. So there's a bit to do in this course. And then we have that 80% pass mark. That's the benchmark, competency benchmark. It's high. We don't shy away from that, but nothing is sort of rocket science. It's all fairly logical stuff, and it will certainly all be covered in the course. And we've got a few things to help you out if you're struggling. So we have one-on-one coaching available. So we've got experienced safe system assessors who will have a Teams call or a Zoom call with you. So if you're struggling with an assignment, or you've had a first go at a quiz and not done so well, you've got 3 attempts, and you might want to get some coaching and talk to somebody about some of the ones you didn't really understand, some of the questions, maybe some stuff you're unsure of. So that's all there to, you've got to do that in order to successfully complete the course and get your certificate. Now, before I jump into some of the content, I just want to contextualize Safe System assessments in amongst other, there's many different sort of assessment methodologies within road transport. And get this question a bit, but I'll do it straight off the bat and then we'll get into some of the content. Road safety audits have been around a long time, and I'm sure some of you are road safety auditors, or you know road safety auditors, or you've even possibly commissioned audits. They're pretty well established. They've been around for a long time. A design review, well, that's a process that the designers are going to go through as they produce a design, then they'll get somebody else to review it. Sort of independent, check that everything's right, they've done the right calculations, they've made the right assumptions. There's overlap there between road safety audits and design reviews, but there's certainly things that sit outside both of those. Now, safe system assessments, they overlap a little bit with some of the design review stuff and the road safety audit stuff, but they certainly have stuff that sits outside. And it's associated with the way it's done and the way it's presented and what we use it for. Some people confuse safety and design with safe system assessment or a road safety audit. That's another exercise in its own right. My colleague Paul Zlakovic up in Queensland, he runs the safety and design training course, but it's more focused on the worker safety. Can it be constructed safely, maintained safely, decommissioned safely? It's around workplace sort of worker safety, really. That's its major focus. And then we have sort of DDA, which is the Disability Discrimination Act, and that's checking that the facility being built or the road or the upgrade can be used by any person of any ability. And that's a legal requirement to conform with that act. And that's an audit there. There's little bits of overlap in those. So we're here to just talk about the safe system assessment one. But, you know, as I said, if you're an auditor, there'll be things you go, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. I understand that. And there's a lot of that similar view of things. So that's a bit of context for you before we jump into it. I'll pause there, Loretta, and just check in. Have we got any sort of questions or any clarifications that need to be made around the admin logistics management of the course or what we're sort of doing before I jump into some content?
No, all good from my end. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Right. Well, I'm going to get into some content. Now, we do give you a little break around halftime, so you can have a stretch, get a coffee, and so we'll do that, in about 45 minutes' time. The first thing we're going to do is talk about the SAFE system. Now, some of you may be familiar with the SAFE system. You may understand a lot about the SAFE system. You may be a SAFE system expert for that matter. We are going to run through this and ensure everybody understands the principles of the SAFE system. That's a very important starting place to do a SAFE system assessment, is to understand the principles, because yes, we're going to teach you a methodology and just a way to sort of fill out forms and those sorts of things. But your core job is to assess against a set of principles. Now, how well does this project, this proposal, or this bit of road or this street, how well does it align with these principles of the SAFE system? That's the core of what we're doing. So we've got to get everybody on the same page with the principles. My experience is that a lot of people sort of are able to sort of mention specific elements of the SAFE system. They sort of parrot it back. I'm not sure how many have really deeply thought about what that actually means. And certainly we know a lot of ministers and chief executives and politicians and the like sign up to it. And I'm sure they really don't understand what they're signing up to. So, okay, let's get into a little bit of this here. So that by the end of this module, by the end of today's session, you're going to be able to list the principles and elements or pillars of the SAFE system. We're going to start talking about kinetic energy thresholds of different crash types. We're going to sort of compare the traditional approach to road safety with the safe system approach, so you get that understanding of that difference. We're going to look at some behavioural change and vehicle safety interventions. Now, a safe system assessment can look at those in a lot of detail. Most safe system assessments are just focused on the speed and the infrastructure. However, those are elements of the system, and you need to have some base level knowledge in those as well. And we're going to talk about speed and why it's such a critical component of the safe system approach. There's a Wally. Wally count is 1. Wally count is 1. Okay. So the safe system approach it is what we have signed up to. If you're in Australia, it does not matter which jurisdiction you're in, your jurisdiction has committed to the safe system approach. All states, territories, the federal government, all committed to the safe system approach. You can find it in your road safety strategies, you can find it in your action plans, you can find it in the National Road Safety Strategy. We're committed, we're in. But it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy on how you think about the safety of people driving, riding, walking, moving around on our public roads and streets. And we've had this trouble in the past of, well, how do we actually understand how well things align with these principles, this philosophy? And I remember early in my career, we had these programs that we started to that were put out there, the Safe System program. And there were these debates, well, is that safe system? Is it not? We're not doing anything that's not safe system. And it was quite opinion-based, and people had thoughts around it. We needed some sort of assessment methodology to work through, well, yeah, how well does this align with these principles? And the safe system assessment methodology, the framework, was developed by Austroads. And a lot of jurisdictions have jumped on board and said, yeah, okay, good. We've got something now. Let's mandate this, or let's put some requirements in on when safe system assessments must be done. And I've got this slide, I've put it in here early on to sort of point you at what different jurisdictions are doing in this space. Happy to answer questions on this if you've got any questions, but you'll see it in the TMR road safety policy in Queensland, where we're seeing a mandating of safe system assessments for public infrastructure. It's fairly blanket statement. We see some local governments getting on board with that, which is really exciting. Certainly, mandating safe system assessments for their infrastructure investments. New South Wales' recent road safety action plan requires safe system assessments. New Zealand's moved towards what they're calling a safe system audit, which incorporates both a road safety audit and a safe system assessment as a package, and that's going to be done on infrastructure. Victoria and South Australia both have a policy which is identical, except for the front cover and global replace of Vic roads with DIT at the time. So it's now DTP and whatever South Australia is, I forget. And they basically have some dollar value triggers which mandate safe system assessments. Got some stuff happening in Northern Territory, ACT, and Tasmania as well. Nothing has formalised. Western Australia is sort of doing their own different thing going on. There's some interest from Western Australia around safe system assessments by individuals and a few organisations that like the process, but they haven't formalised anything within government. So there you go, a bit of context, showing you that, yeah, this process is being taken on, and it's growing, and it's certainly starting to be a big part of the assessment of roads to make sure we're making them as safe as we possibly can for all road users. So I'll take you back in time now to explain a bit about the safe system. And this diagram, back early in my career, in about 2000 and, well, I won't answer. I won't answer that. Maybe I'll give a prize. This is the time that I was in Victoria, but Australia was adopting the safe system. So when did the federal government of Australia actually formally adopt the safe system approach to road safety? I've given you a little bit of a clue. I almost said the year. Guess the year. Now, you're not marked on anything that happens in a live session. You're only marked on the quizzes. So you're free to just guess in the chat. Just guess a year, the closest to the year that the federal government adopted the safe system approach, formally adopted the safe system approach. I'll give you a prize. So let's see if anybody wants to throw it into the chat. Good. We've got some people popping their guesses in. Loretta, I think the answer is 2004. Gee, Penelope, you were close, but Leah was there first with correct answer, 2004. So our first prize winner. And Loretta keeps a note of this. So this diagram's 2004. It's actually about 2003. We're debating it. Come up with this diagram. So it was actually in the middle there, might be a bit hard to read. Human tolerance to physical force. How much force can the human body take before it breaks, before it results in a serious injury or a death? That's the central element of it. It's absolutely mind-blowing at the time to think about that as a starting point for a road and street transport philosophy. But it's good. It started there. Then there was speeds, vehicles, and roads and roadsides, and a circle drawn around that. And that was actually it. That was the safe system. And that sort of split the room. This was at an Austroads level, but it split the room. And half of the room said, well, hang on a second. Haven't you forgotten like the pretty important part of it, the people, and making sure that they are alert and compliant and acting appropriately and behaving? Now, the other half of the room was saying, no, like these are humans. They're hopeless. They make mistakes, they fall asleep, they get drunk, they take risks, they do all sorts of crazy things. And they all just, get distracted. They've got different skill levels. It's all over the place. What we need to do and what our responsibility is create this system that's essentially impenetrable to all of those, human characteristics. Anyway, the debate raged. And eventually what they did was they put this square around it and said, we'll compromise by putting a square and saying alert compliant road users. Now, that was thrown out a couple of years later as a bit of a fail because it really does go against the core of the safe system philosophy. Because while we are going to try to encourage road users and do everything we can to make them as alert and compliant as possible, our system needs to tolerate somebody who is not alert or not compliant, right? And make it so it doesn't result in death or serious injury. It could have other consequences. It could be fines. It could be, so to try to get more alertness and compliance, it could be some property damage. It could be an immobilization, so a lack of mobility, so they can't go places if they're not alert or compliant. But there's got to be an understanding that that is the road user that we have. They are not all always alert and compliant. And our job is to say, right, how do we design, manage, maintain, and operate a system that acknowledges that? Doesn't condone that, doesn't encourage that, but acknowledges that exists, and that's the user of our system. It's a challenge. But anyway, we then came up with all these new diagrams of the safe system. Everybody jumped in and got on board, and different circles, and you might recognize one or two of those. I'm going to talk to this sort of simplistic one just for the ease of discussion about it. At the center of the system, we've got human. And what we're trying to do is eliminate death and serious injury for humans. It doesn't necessarily mean eliminating crashes. It just means eliminating death and serious injury. The principles, the core principles we've got, and one of them is squarely acknowledged there, which is counter to what that early diagram says. This actually says, hey, people make mistakes. we're going to minimize, we're going to try and do stuff to minimize the mistake making, but we've got to start designing that system for mistakes. And we're going to understand the human bodies are vulnerable. So that's back in there. When these mistakes happen, what is the biomechanics of injury? How much force in different crash types, in different scenarios, can the human body handle? And we've got a shared responsibility. This is often misinterpreted under the SAFE system because people think, oh, so that's good because road users, they need to be responsible. Well, the original reason for that shared responsibility component in the SAFE system was to actually get us to take responsibility, system designers, to not say, well, they fell asleep, right? You shouldn't fall asleep driving. And if you do, there's a chance you'll be killed, right? We need to say, okay, what can we do to wake the driver up, to manage the energy in the crash if it does happen? So it's that real acknowledgement that is our responsibility. When a driver breaks a road rule, that is our responsibility, right? When a driver gets in their car drunk and drives, that's our responsibility. Okay? That absolutely is fundamental to the SAFE system, and it is absolutely infuriating, right? However, it is the reality. Now, I've done hundreds of in-depth fatal crash investigations and serious injury investigations in my time, and I can always, in every one of them, I could find something associated with a road user that they weren't alert or compliant in some description. Where do we get with saying, well, that's their fault, that's their fault, and we just continue to do that? We have to flip that on its head and say, no, that's a system failure. Our system failed. And if you go to other industries, you'll discover a very, very different attitude to all of this. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Around the outside, we have these elements we can use, these levers. We've got the vehicles, we've got the roads and roadsides. We can still work to get better performance out of the humans. There's limitations on what we can actually do there, but we can do stuff that works. And we've got the speed this all happens at. Vehicle speed predominantly, but sometimes we think and analyze cyclist speed and the like as well. So I'll pop those up there, the key principles, and I see Loretta's popping on the screen, so there must be a question, which is excellent. Let me just finish this. No death or serious injury. People are vulnerable, so that's a human tolerance to physical force. We're going to analyze that in detail. Mistake making, factor it in. That's going to happen. And a shared responsibility, but that ultimate responsibility rests with us. You can get as angry as you want about that because, wow, we see some inappropriate stuff happening out there on the road network, but that's on us. It's on us to change our system. So either that can't happen in the future or that any issues with that don't result in death or serious injury. And we can alter vehicles, we can restrict access, we can do all sorts of things to address that. But just saying, well, that's their fault, pushing blame to an individual road user is not the way we solve this. Right, Loretta, what were you going to ask me?
All right, we have a question that's come through. Ministers and jurisdictions have signed up to the SSA, but how do we communicate the shared responsibility better so that it doesn't be misinterpreted to absolve accountability and perhaps contribute to us mostly have unsafe default speed limits, etc.? Do our diagrams lead to a misinterpretation of the need to have a safe system road? Otherwise, the system is already set up to fail before human fallibility, etc., come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And prize there. I've been lobbying and advocating to get rid of the shared responsibility in our safe system diagrams because of its misinterpretation, its misunderstanding. The thing is, under a safe system, we'll continue to do work to try to improve road user behaviour. We're not going to like ignore that completely. But it is really important that we understand exactly what Penelope is saying there. Is that this is not pushing responsibility to the individual road user, as many represent that. What I do is add a little disclaimer a lot of the time to shared responsibility, and I make sure I say ultimate responsibility rests with the system designers if they're insistent on keeping shared responsibility in that diagram. But if you're in an opportunity to redo safe system diagrams, yeah, get rid of it. Just yeah. And the Swedes sort of have a lovely triangle, if I can remember it. So, you know, if a crash happens, and then they look and the road user has done something inappropriate, and they say, what do we need to change in the system for that? And then it's back to there. So if you then have another crash, okay, it is always coming back to the system designers there for what can we change in the system. And by the system, I don't just mean road system. I know a lot of the time we're working directly with road designers, traffic engineers and the like, and we're very focused on the physical infrastructure and the like. And that's a hugely important component of it. We can do amazing stuff with that. But we've got to think about the vehicle, the policies, the enforcement, the technology, and ways we can do that. We do a little exercise sometimes now in our crash investigations in the office, where we will look at a fatal crash and sort of say, well, what can we do to eliminate the possibility of this? And it does not matter what behavior has occurred. What could we have done to absolutely eliminate this from ever sort of happening again? And there's lots you can do. There's certainly a lot with the vehicles and vehicle technology and things that are coming in, and there's stuff with the infrastructure. There's even things. You have high-speed stuff down through residential areas and stuff like that. We can virtually eliminate the possibility of that with appropriate local area traffic management. There's a physical infrastructure technique, but we can also speed limit vehicles, and we can do all sorts of changes. Let me sort of build on that with a bit of a discussion about safety culture 101 here. And I'm going to jump out of roads and transport, where we immerse ourselves, and I'm going to go into manufacturing. And I'm going to go into the manufacturing of some sort of, widgets or something like that, which is, if you have, back in the day, these factories and areas were a fairly open system. And they, by open system, I mean, yes, people came in and they worked and they were employed, but they also, would get people, give them a bit of training, a bit of information, tell them what to do, tell them the areas that are dangerous, and then say, hey, you have to be safe in here. This is really dangerous. Factories are very dangerous. You have to protect yourself and make sure you are safe. And so if you are pushing responsibility for safety to an individual in an inherently unsafe environment, that's what we call a pathological safety culture. Then it sort of evolves from that to a reactive safety culture, which then when a machine sort of crushes some people or rips some arms off, they'll look at that machine and say, well, could we do something to it? Could we put a guard on it? Could we change the way it operates or the like? And then they change it. So that's the reactive safety culture. Then the economists get involved, and they start to say, well, hang on a second, this is actually costing us money, because we've got the machines are down because people are pulling body parts out of the machines. We lose a worker who is, producing great outputs for us. We have to pay some money to the family. And, it takes us a while to get the machines back up and running. If we actually do some safety improvements here, it's going to make us more widgets and more money. So it's a good economic thing to do. And they start to say, well, they start to say, well, okay, let's invest a bit in safety for the economic return. They come up with a benefit cost ratio, and then off they go. But you find that right balance. But then we step up to what we look at as a proactive safety culture. And this is where safety sets the precondition for production, right? Essentially, they say we have to have this very high level of safety, and we will produce widgets within that envelope. And if we exceed the envelope of safety and the risk exceeds what's acceptable, we will bring it back down by stopping production until it's in there. And then you need to heavily invest in maintaining that proactive safety culture. Now, where do we sit with the road transport system? Well, it kind of straddles a few of these, I think. We have a heavy pathological safety culture, which is to say, exactly as we were talking about before. I mean, we know the system's unsafe, but we don't shy away from that when we're licensing young people and saying, it is super dangerous out there on the roads, and it's your responsibility to act safely. I mean, that statement is so pathological in safety. Like it's the insight into the pathological nature of our safety culture with roads. Yeah, we're not going to stop doing that because we're trying to, address some of the behavior. But really, what we should be then, when people say that, they should say, why is our system so unsafe? Right? Reactive safety culture, certainly there's a lot of that goes on. If there's deaths, there's spots, black spots, areas like that, we try to, fix those. There's BCRs coming out our ears in transport safety, and we're like, well, what's the optimal investment? Exactly how many people are we comfortable killing and seriously injuring to move people and goods around this network? And the economists debate that, and everybody debates that, right? Well, we've got to try and step up into the proactive safety culture, and that's where the safe system sits. And it says, well, no, the preservation of human health and human life is paramount, and we'll move people and goods around that within that envelope. We can certainly absolutely do that. It's not going to grind everything to a halt. We just need to have that as our precondition. And there's been some good examples of, I feel, safety culture in the proactive sense. May not be the absolute application of what we like, but early adoption of school speed zones to me is an example of proactive safety culture in the road and transport system, in the sense that it was not pathological in saying pushing all responsibility for safety to the school kids, although we still do a bit of that, but that's, got that other part of it. But it wasn't reactive. You didn't only put a school speed zone where kids were killed. It wasn't calculating in the sense that it is actually really bad economic investment under current transport economic models. There's, it's grotesque, but if you use normal transport economic models, there's just not enough kids killed to warrant the slowing down of the vehicles through that area. Ridiculous. I mean, it shines a light on the inadequacies of the economic transport models we use a lot of the time. But anyway, it is proactive in the sense that it's a safety intervention. It doesn't meet those. Now, I think we could do more with that, but at least a philosophical sense, it's a pretty good example. So we're trying to push everything up this end in a safety culture sense. Now, I remind you, you don't get marked on any of the quizzes or anything during the live course. Simply at the end, you will get some similar questions like these little ones we're going to do live here, and you will be marked on those ones at the end. But what should hopefully happen here is a poll will pop up on your screen. Now, one of the questions we've sort of been through, and one of them we haven't, so you'll have to have a guess at it. But not sure if Loretta's there. We lost.
Yep. No, yep. I'm here. Just launching that now. Should be on screen.
Right. Yep. I can see that. Okay. Two questions. One we've sort of talked through, and then one we haven't. The Usain Bolt one we haven't, but that's going to be for you to have a guess at. Remember, you're not being marked on it.
I might just point out while everyone's reading through that, if you can't see the poll, it could be due to your company's firewalls. I know I think Transport for New South Wales, maybe TMR. Sometimes you can't see the poles pop up just based on your firewalls. So as Ken mentioned, you're not marked on this anyway.
Yeah. And Penelope brings up a good point while people are popping that in there, that there are certainly limitations on school speed zones and the extent of where they are provided. We know there's certainly risk on the routes to schools, and that interfaces heavily with people's willingness to let their children walk and ride and have active forms of transport to school. And we also see as impact. So it's a very complex area, but there are some, simpler ways to address a lot of those issues with wide management of speed in the catchment areas of schools and transport hubs and those sort of areas. So yeah, really good point. We make some progress in those areas. It's always frustrating how slow it is, but okay, we'll give you a couple more seconds on that. And remember, we will give you a little stretch break pretty shortly. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's end that poll. Let's have a look at how people went there. So I think we can bring that up on screen. So the first question was, which of the following is not a key principle of a safe system? So aim for no death or serious injury. Well, that is our aim. Aim for no mistakes on the road. Yeah. So in some utopian world, that would be amazing. And maybe one day when it's only robots using the road system, that might be the case. But certainly with humans involved, we know mistakes will happen, and our job is to create a system that caters for those mistakes, doesn't encourage them, doesn't down them in that sense, but caters for them. Usain Bolt, what speed did Usain Bolt cross the finish line in his world record 100-meter sprint? What a odd question to ask in a road safety course. Well, the answer is 44 kilometers an hour. Now, some of you probably did back of envelope calculations there, or in your head at least, and converting meters a second. And but did you account for acceleration and time in accelerating? So cross the finish line at 44 kilometers an hour. So I suppose the question is, why am I asking that? Well, I like to use this little analogy, and I like to pretend that we park a car at the end of Usain Bolt's lane. Let's park a Toyota Hilux at the end of Usain Bolt's lane, and he comes running down that straight at 44 kilometers an hour, and then bang, he slams into that. And the question is sort of, will he survive? And the answer is generally yes, he will survive. He's a very strong, very robust human, and he will sort of survive that force. Pick any of us mere mortals up and throw us at that car at 44 kilometers an hour. It's getting a bit dicey on our survivability. And certainly if we picked up, like, I don't know, our parents or something like that, so old, more frail people, they're not going to survive a 44 kilometer per hour strike against a vehicle. And we have a little bit more understanding around these sort of speeds and forces and crash types. And this diagram, while there's lots and lots of research happening around the world about this, I was just in the US talking to people who are doing some more research around the biomechanics of injury and different crash types and all like. We know that if we've got a collision speed down here, this is not speed limit. This is impact speed, right? This is just the physics of it, the biomechanics of it, right? Impact speed and the chance it's going to result in death. We sort of see that 20, 30 kilometer per hour is generally survivable. And then it starts to go really bad after about 30 kilometers per hour. It exponentially kicks up there. Great man comes in up there, but this is for this is for the community. So there's people that sit sort of all around that. This is a macro study. There's been lots of studies and they're trying to put them all together into a curve and lots of crashes and everything like that. So it's a general trend. Now the human body is like it's designed to handle some force. There you go. Hopefully that played for you. It's the old classic. I'll play it again. Yeah, that's what the human body is designed to handle, that sort of stuff. Okay, it's not fun, and we might break a few ribs, but we will recover to lead a normal, healthy life. There's a general correlation between a person's maximum running speed on flat ground and their ability to handle running into solid objects like that, or trees or the like. You can test it for yourself, should you like. Run at your absolute top running speed at a tree. You should survive. Yes, you'll hurt yourself in the short term, but you should lead a normal, healthy life. That is how we evolved. But we're propelling ourselves faster, we're propelling things faster at us. And we've got this for different crash types. So I showed you in the green there was passenger vehicle striking pedestrian. But now we have passenger vehicle striking other passenger vehicle at a right angle. And so down the bottom here, we've got bullet vehicle speed. So bullet vehicle, the bullet vehicle is the one that does the damage in a crash. That will be the target vehicle in this. So bullet vehicle speed here, that's the bullet vehicle speed. The target vehicle could sort of just pull out from the side road or the like, and they're struck. We see that 30, 40, around the 50 kilometer per hour mark is where it really starts to kick up there. So small increments after a 50 become really significant in the proportion of our community killed. We have this for head-on crashes as well. And this is the speed of each vehicle here. And in this scenario, each vehicle is a target vehicle and a bullet vehicle. But the collision speed here, we see around that 70 kilometer per hour of each vehicle speed there. Now, some people say, okay, so we've got 140 kilometers per hour of force there. Well, you kind of do, but you kind of don't. So you do in the sense if there was somebody standing in the middle, they got squashed, or one was a very small little, small, tiny car, and the other was a big road train, and it came in and pushed it back at 70 kilometers an hour. But under the scenario of two vehicles, the same weight, same mass, same speed, coming in, hitting directly like that, it's a 70 kilometer per hour crash for the individual occupants of those vehicles, because they go from 70 kilometers an hour down to 0. And it's the deceleration in these crashes that, in those head-on crashes, certainly causes the major injuries. So you'll see in the PDFs, if you download them, we put these little buttons where you can click on it and get a little more information on a topic like this, a little bit on biomechanics of injury. When Loretta shows us through the learning management system near the end of the session, you'll see that we also drop little videos in and we have other bits of information. So if there's something that sparks some real interest from you, you're able to dig deeper into it with us pointing you at a few things. And of course, at any point, you can shoot an email through to me or to the training and say, hey, is there any more information around this topic? And we'll be able to point you at some stuff. But these become a really important sort of this becomes an important line for us. And it's that point where things start to really exponentially go up under these sort of crash curves. You may hear people debate these curves, and that's fine. And I'm always up for people digging further, investigating, questioning. The spread we see from studies around the world, either side of these curves, makes me very much think we've they're still fairly applicable. And so I still use, and Australians still uses, and others still use these points of 30 kilometers per hour for crashes involving pedestrians or cyclists, 50 kilometers per hour for side impact crashes, 70 kilometers per hour for these head-on crashes. And those are what we're going to call safe system threshold speeds, where we want to keep speeds under that where these crash types can happen. We're okay to go above that if those crash types can't happen. Now, of course, there's lots more crashes, and a little window into some of our later modules is that we start to try to dig into this and score how bad a crash is going to be when it happens. And so you'll see scores of 4 to 0, and we have different crash types here and different speeds, and you can sort of correlate them. And there's certainly this sort of graduated shading there to show those differences. But we'll come back to that and use that and explain that in more detail when you get in and roll your sleeves up and start doing the safe system assessing. Now, this diagram has been around in road safety for a long time. Actually, there were variations of this well before 2003. And they come from crash causation studies. And this particular diagram infuriates me. And I get so angry when people find it and then, start to say, well, we've worked out road safety. So this is the output of big crash causation studies. And that's looking at, 1,000 crashes or 5,000 crashes and doing in-depth root cause analysis and trying to understand what are the causes here? What are the actual real causes of this crash? And what they discover is that driver error, and this 2003 Kimbler study was around drivers, so that's why it says driver. It applies fairly much the same with other road user error as well. But driver error makes up something like 90 to 93% of death on the road network in terms of crash causation. Roads overlap a bit, vehicles overlap a smaller bit. I don't dispute their research, right? It's amazing research. They've done a huge amount of work on it. But the reason I really despise this diagram is that people get it and then they think, right, well, we know what the biggest problem is and let's fix it. Let's fix that human. Let's change humans. Changing humans is the hardest thing to do, right? And it's the least sustainable in that sense because new ones keep appearing out all the time. So even if we could, and we really struggle to, even if we could really change human behavior in significant ways, we've got to keep getting the new ones as they come in. And it's the hardest thing we've got. But if you just look at that, it's what you naturally gravitate towards. But the new way we want to think about this is to say, this is a system failure. Our system failed. Our system failed in the sense that we let this crash has happened and it's resulted in death or serious injury. Now, what can we change in our system to mean it doesn't result in death or serious injury or it doesn't happen at all? Now, Austroads came up with a diagram and they put little bits of driver excess and driver inexperience outside there. I'm not quite comfortable with that. I see why they did it, but those could become in. Driver excess, driver inexperience are just system failures. Like, how has that highly inexperienced driver got out into the public road system? It's a fair question to ask. But nonetheless, let's think of it as system failures. And there's a little bit of a misconception about human error in the transport system. And the Centre for Automotive Safety Research at the University of Adelaide did a good study, a big, good academic study on human error in road transport. And that sort of categorized all of these issues into slips, lapses, mistakes, unintentional violations, and deliberate violations. And the media fixates on deliberate violations. This is, really blatantly intentional high speeds through areas, or very highly intoxicated, or on drugs and driving, and these sorts of really extreme behaviors that result in deaths on the road network, and they get a lot of media attention. All right. But interestingly, if you sort of look at that, they make up about, under this study, about 30% of death and serious injury on the road network. That's significant. Don't get me wrong, and we need to really look at that. But if we draw a line there, that means that about 70% of the death and serious injury on the road network are people just making human errors, things that they're trying to generally go about their business, generally in a reasonable way, and they're being killed or seriously injured. So we need to really question that. Now, I did some work in this space. It's very, very hard. In fact, I would say that this 70% we can fix by altering our system. We can make that not result in death or serious injury, or not happen. And we've got the tools in our toolkit to do that. About, maybe 15 to 20% of this. So, sorry, 15% or so of that, we also fix with some of these things up here. But there is a residual, we just don't know what to do with it at the moment. It's probably bigger societal changes, and there's this big link between, it was in the Australis report we were working on, we stated it as a line, people drive the way they live, and there's, huge risk-taking activities and across their life, not just on the roads, but other elements. And it's sort of, there's a lot in that. But for us, that's a huge amount of the system that we can alter to get close to eliminating death and serious injury. Now, what I want to do is give you time for a break, a stretch, time to fill up a coffee, but also to play this little game, which is what we've got a mix and match exercise, we call it. So on the left there, you'll see the traditional approach to road safety. And some of them, this has come from an Austrades thing as well, but victim blaming, emphasis on education and compliance. And I want you to change it to where we're going with a safe system approach. Now, some could go to different ones, so don't get overstressed about it and the like. Just use it as a way to consolidate your thinking and make sure you've got your head around this safe system philosophy and, how it's different to the traditional sort of approach to road safety. Now, we're doing this by a bit of a poll as well, but if the poll doesn't come up, you could, type it into the chat if you wanted, 1A or 2C, whatever it is. Just go through them. So I'm going to give you now 6.5 minutes. That's stretch. Fill up a water, get back, make some guesses on this, and then we'll get back into it, okay? 6.5 minutes. Okay, give it a couple more seconds. Okay, I'll give you 5 more seconds. Don't worry, you're not being marked on it. Make a guess if you haven't had a go at it. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's end that poll. And Yeah, I'm just having a flick through the results. It might be easier if I just do this on the screen. So let's get rid of that. There was a bit of uniformity in the answers there. And as I say, a few of these could go any different ones, but they're a good way to consolidate thinking. So victim blaming, and while people wouldn't have called it victim blaming in the past, essentially it was what it was, which was to say find fault and the person who was injured, well, what did they do wrong? But no, it's now that recognizing human error and minimizing its consequence. So there was that heavy influence on Road Zero's education and compliance. We're not going to ignore all of that, but we're just saying we need to create this system that is forgiving of human error and alter that system accordingly. A focus on crash reduction. So yeah, we're going to try to stop crashes happening, but we really want to look at the consequence of crashes now as well. And in fact, that's often for me the starting point. When I look at a bit of the road network or a design, I say, how bad is it going to be when the crashes happen? Right? It used to, for the bulk of my career, it was what is going to cause a crash here? But now it's flipped. 4 pillars action independently to this. 4 pillars optimized jointly as an interaction. They are very interacting elements. And a mobility safety balance, finding that just right point to know, saying we need to understand safe mobility and we need to maximize it. So Ian Cameron, Western Australian, came up with this nice statement, which I think it sums things up nicely. We need a paradigm shift in road safety policy to stop the road death epidemic, and we need it now. It's unrealistic to expect that education and enforcement alone will bring the needed step change. Even road users who know and follow the rules make mistakes. A safe system creates an environment in which simple mistakes will no longer kill people or kill or seriously injure people. Keep a count on your wallies. You can just keep that count to yourself, and because you'll get a quiz at the end of this, which Loretta's going to show you in the learning management system, and that's when you can put in your wally count. All right, okay, so let's have another look at a bit of this philosophy of the safe system in action, and we'll have a look at this. I suppose this is a little insight into safe system assessing. Here's a bit of high-speed road network. This is 100 kilometre per hour road up Melbourne Highway. It's got a central barrier system in a narrow flushed median there. You can see it's a wire rope safety barrier system. It took a long time to go through the planning design process and actually get this installation in place. It was a high-speed road separated by a centre line. That was all. And they're widening a little bit and putting this barrier system down the middle. Now, just as a bit of an exercise, get you typing again, get you putting some ideas in. Throughout the development, the planning, the design of this, up to all the way approval and for construction, what challenges do you think that they faced in this? What are some of the things? You don't see much of the road there. There's a little bit more of the road you can see. Barrier down the middle of the road, narrow flushed median. What are some of the challenges? Just type them into the chat. Things you think that they had to sort of try to get over, hurdles in the project. Pop a few in the chat. We'll see what people come up with. I might give some prizes out if there are some good ones that come in. Okay. Right. Okay, now they're coming in thick and fast. That's good. All right, let's have a look. Thank you. Doing well here. So we kicked it off with a few so we've got excavation. Yeah, so it's in a cutting. So yeah, that's I think it sort of links with some other ones that came in around cost. What does it cost? Is that worth the investment? Those sort of things. Native vegetation removal, drainage. along the edge of the formation. So yeah, we're into some civil sort of stuff, and these are all the challenges you face in a lot of projects, different types, native vegetation removal, closing the road to install. So yeah, construction, stability of the slope, widening the road to allow wide centerline. So Michelle's popped in their maintenance, and I think that's probably an interesting one. I'm going to give a prize there for that. Not that the others aren't absolutely part of it. A lot of those ones come with any road upgrade project or new road project, but this one in the Central Barrier. So maintenance was interesting. Well, the maintenance teams sort of said, well, how are we going to maintain the barrier when it's hit, and how are we going to maintain the road now without being able to put vehicles onto the other side? The width, Tyler's now said wire rope barrier deflection. I'm going to give Tyler a prize there because that was one that took an amazing amount of energy in this project, which was that, a wire rope safety barrier post breakaway and it deflects. And technically, this is going to deflect a little bit into the oncoming lane. And so that was pointed out as a reason to not do the project. The project can't be done because it will slightly deflect into the oncoming lane. Butters, no stopping bays, future maintenance crossovers. So lots of good points in there. And thank you for that. All needed to be thought through in a lot of detail. But interestingly, in a project like this, which is not, we're seeing a bit more of this happening around Australia now, but a road safety audit on a project proposal like this will, by its nature, simply list risks associated with the installation of this. It is not a road safety auditor's task to tell you how good it is, how much it's going to benefit anything. That's not their role. Their role is to tell you how risky, all the risks these are. And by the nature of receiving that report, somebody might see this as a risky project because a lot of the things you've mentioned, a lot of practical issues, deflecting into the oncoming lanes, different vehicles, animals getting across, turnaround bays, ability to enforce. These are all sorts of things that, are there. But the advantage of a safe system assessment in a project like this is that it actually quantifies the benefit, or it puts some metrics around how much of a risk reduction are we going to get by implementing this. And that helps a lot. If people are a little bit nervous, they see this, they've got this report that says, this is going to reduce risk significantly. Here's some numbers around that. And now here are some issues for us to work through in terms of the specific application of this and those sorts of things. So that's, to me, a safe system assessment actually fosters us transforming the road network properly. Road safety audits have a really important purpose, but I did find sometimes they were hampering us actually fundamentally changing anything. Anyway, that one, of course, got hit. I mean, it was put out there to stop vehicles getting into the other lane, and it certainly did that. Interestingly, in this crash, one of the people involved in it called the regional office and talked to one of the engineers involved in the installation of this project, and they were smart enough to get the comms people involved because that person wasn't ringing up to shout at them, which is normally what happens when the public rings you. And it wasn't me, but I've been a regional engineer and I've certainly been shouted at by a lot of people. But they just wanted to thank them for putting the barrier in because they thought it saved their life. And they made a nice little video out of that. The comms people were really good at that. So we'll pop that into the learning management system as well if you're interested. Okay, I'm going to briefly cover off some of these other elements of the safe system just to holistically understand road safety before we spend our next 4 modules really focused on roads, streets, road design, speeds, managing speeds, and those sorts of considerations, and of course the assessment methodology itself. But let's talk about road users. I've sort of said the limitations we have. We struggle to fundamentally change humans. We know that that's an ongoing thing, that we get new people entering into the driving environment. We have new people using bikes and crossings and those sorts of things. So some of the things we know, though, do provide some benefit: education, encouragement, enforcement, and some sort of like licensing system entry into the system, or stopping people from entering into the system. Education, of course, across the board, not just road safety. Young people are very receptive to taking on ideas and learning, and certainly we know that in road safety messages. There are also nice little Trojan horses of messages into their parents as well. If you can instill in them, everybody must wear a seatbelt in the car, and they'll call that out when people aren't wearing seatbelts as well. So that's, there's good opportunity. When young drivers start their driving tasks, they're at high risk there. We know there's a few things about that. We know getting the full hours out there with supervising drivers is highly beneficial on the public road network. We know that getting young drivers into the safest vehicles possible is important. We often see parents who are very concerned about the safety of their kids, who are somehow happy for them to be driving around in very, very poor safety cars, while they drive around in cars that have, every safety feature you could possibly imagine. So there's some oddness there, and we need to sort of shine a light on that. We know that advanced driver training courses and the like make it more likely that a young driver is going to be killed or seriously injured on the road. So that's a bit counterintuitive, but if you send young drivers to any sort of course where they learn to do high-speed braking, get out of skids, skid pan training, or anything like that, they will be more likely to be killed or seriously injured on the roads, because they might get a little bit of new skills that might help them in some situations, but their increased risk-taking activity as a result of that increased confidence and the like, it just absolutely swamps any reduction in risk. So we need to be really careful around a lot of that. And in terms of talking to the public about safety, and this sort of links a little bit with behavioral change campaigns and these sorts of things as well, talking to an individual about their risk of death or serious injury as a driver, especially here, is very hard to convince them of anything. So if we were to take, the driver in this ad, TAC ad, great little ad, and say to them, hey, don't text and drive because it increases your chance of being killed or seriously injured, they're not going to believe us. I mean, the odds of them being killed or seriously injured personally as a result of that is so minuscule. They will text and drive, and they will not get caught. They will not be involved in a crash. And it's just actually, let's put not get caught aside. They will not be involved in a crash. And it reinforces that message we were giving is just not true. The individual risk versus collective risk is important to understand. At an individual risk level, and please don't sort of repeat this sort of stuff to the wider public. At an individual risk level, the chance of being killed or seriously injured using mobile phones or speeding is minuscule. But we don't operate a transport system at an individual risk level. We operate it at a collective risk level. And you need to add up all of those minuscule risks to get a significant societal problem associated with texting or speeding or drink driving, right? But we talk to an individual like they're a collective, like a community, and they don't hear it that way. So it's a real, we've really messed up. But as soon as you're able to actually lever it to something that they can understand at an individual level, like if you text and drive, your kid is more likely to text and drive, that somehow elicits the behavioral change we're looking for. I find this for speed limits in rural areas. Like speed limits in urban areas is a different kettle of fish for me. We lever off other things in those areas: active transport, health, noise, so many good things associated with, and the safety of vulnerable road users and getting them to be the advocates for it. But in the rural environment, trying to reduce speeds can be really problematic because you don't have as much of that lever. And we often just say, oh, we're reducing the speed from 100 to 80 on this road for your safety. Gee, they don't believe it. I've been driving this road 40 years and never had an issue. It's all those other, that stuff you hear all the time. Well, we've got to change the message and start targeting other things there. Good Tasmanian study actually that showed that if you're doing that, like it's actually more acceptable to the community to reduce the speed limit on a road for the protection of animals than the protection of humans in the rural environment. That is interesting. It gives you a little window into how we think about risk around the driving task. So we know a whole school education, not just these sort of one-offs. We need that through the whole of their education, combining with other partner activities such as the police and the like. Supporting community. We have lots of the members of the community who are very passionate about improving road safety. Tragically, it comes often from some tragic events, but we have the responsibility to provide them with the information on what is evidence-based. And I think the advanced driver training example I gave earlier is a very good one, because we see community groups funding their young drivers in their community to go to these courses. And we're like, well, the evidence is clear. You're going to make them more likely to be killed or seriously injured. And we've got to provide that information. And even also things like, taking kids to the emergency ward to see the results of inappropriate driving. That doesn't change behavior. It has some other impacts on young people, not good impacts. So, these sort of things we've got to be quite careful with. What intuitively looks like it would work, let's go to the evidence. Let's really understand it, and then support ones that we have an evidence base. Graduated licensing scheme. So that's where you restrict drivers as they enter into the system and then release the restrictions as you go. Education targeting, especially motivated groups. So, most motivated is parents usually, and activating them to be serious in the management of risk for their young driver is great. And action programs to change the way road users use it. I'll talk about that later. I think I've covered most of these, but fear tactics. So that one of, going through the morgue or even the shock and awe campaigns on TV don't have great effect on behavior change. You might wonder why then there was that whole campaign of shock and awe, those TV ads that were just absolutely horrific that were out for quite a while back, maybe 20 years ago. Well, there was a bit less research around it, but there was also fear tactics can be effective in setting a platform for legislative change. So if you're trying to introduce speed cameras, alcohol testing, drug testing, these sorts of things, red light cameras, scaring the public significantly and then explaining we're doing this to let that can kind of be a reasonable way to do it. But it doesn't, the fear tactic itself is not the thing that changes behavior. It's the enforcement mechanisms that come after that. There is a bit of behavior change around fear tactics for an individual, but that is from the safest individuals and like the lowest risk individuals. They get scared and they just stop travel. They stop driving, they stop, they're too scared to do that. So it's a weird way to try and get behavior change. We talked about skill-based driver training doesn't work. One-off events don't work. Driver simulators, there's nothing in that space that we've found so far. There could be newer research, newer things, but I'm not aware of it. Please send it through if you know of actual research on that one. Don't send me more of the bloody stuff that the driver simulator companies are producing themselves. It's not independent research. It's their marketing. Car racing clubs, go-karting clubs, that's essentially skill-based driver training, gives them more confidence and they take more risks. Just informing, again, like a bit like fear tactics. If you tell people how many people have been killed on a road that they're about to drive on, the bulk won't change their behavior. Some will. Some of the safest ones anyway will change their behavior. But it can be a decent way to set a platform for changes. I'll take questions in a minute, Loretta. This is an interesting diagram. It's used often to justify the graduated licensing system, but what it has there is L plates. So that's where you have a supervising driver sitting next to the young driver. P plates is where they are out there by themselves. They go through a couple of phases of P plates and then they're fully licensed. And these are crash numbers. This works out somewhat similar with vehicle kilometers, crashes per vehicle kilometer travel as well. But you see that learner drivers are very safe. Then it just goes hugely up as soon as they're out by themselves. It goes down and then it plateaus off after about 8 years, and it kicks up a little bit at the end as we get older drivers in terms of a vehicle kilometer travel risk space, but the actual numbers continue to just plateau down or stay about the same. So that explains why there's more restrictions that go into P-platers. However, what I use this diagram for is to say there's almost no more safer driver than a driver on their first time behind the wheel on the public road network. So anybody who tells me it's all about, we need drivers to have more skills and they all need to be Daniel Ricciardo style, with that level of training, and that's how we would prevent all death and serious injury. I just showed them this diagram and I say, well, that's not true, is it? Like, surely these people have more skills than this person. They're more risky. Okay, encouragement is something that we haven't done a lot of in the road safety space. I think we can do more of it. Incentivizing campaigns and programs, trying to incentivize there, paying people essentially to drive safer or to, incentivizing them to stop. So like no demerit points if you, free license if you don't have any demerit points or those sorts of incentives there's a bit of evidence around those actually having an effect. Talking about a specific behavior as a part of a coordinated effort, and then sort of activating using different techniques. So comedy is a a reasonable way to target young males. That's probably one of the most effective, and that's a real target group in road safety. How effective is it in action change is hard to tell. It's a very challenging thing to evaluate road safety campaigns from the behavioral change perspective, but they get good recall. But we're going to see a lot more now trying to get people to understand a bit of this. Okay, people make mistakes. We need to change our system. So this one is a little bit shock and awe if you know this one from South Australia. It's actually a New Zealand one originally, but it's not trying to say, hey, slow down because you might make a mistake. It's others. It's pushing that out there. How do you talk to the community about human tolerance to physical force is a bit of a challenging one often. If you've ever seen Graham, that's a unique attempt at it by the Transport Action Commission again in Victoria. Graham is a life-size sculpture, scarily human-looking thing, but it's the only person designed to survive on the roads. And it's setting a seed of questioning why you would need to look like that to survive on the roads and the forces on the roads. And it's actually a part of a whole wider thing with young students and getting them to be the next generation of people who question the fundamentals of risk on our road system. Enforcement. Enforcement is important. It sort of underpins a lot of safe system elements. We know that you can either you need to strategically enforce due to the cost of people out there and the challenges of deployment. Technology is starting to help us a lot there, but we need to be strategic with it. There is both specific and general deterrence. So specific deterrence is the theory that if you are fined for something, you won't do it again. General deterrence, slightly different, is that you could be fined for something, so you won't do it. They're the slight differences. Visual presence significantly helps in that general deterrence. So you don't need to have been fined, but seeing a police officer out there, it could be, and what we see an interesting thing called the halo effect, which is incredibly good behavior from a halo around anyone or a visual presence of police. And then it goes back to normal driving behavior after that. The halo can be, there's a few different studies on it, 500 meters to about 2 kilometers. As I mentioned, technology, and this is a great space and a great opportunity there for us to be able to improve compliance through technology, through point-to-point speed cameras, through red light cameras, through in-vehicle enforcement techniques. And here's alcohol interlocks, for example, or we could do in-vehicle monitoring and enforcement. There's so many opportunities out there, even some sort of like easier entryways, like some of the vehicles have a particular key that you can give to a young driver, which means that they can't go over a certain speed and they can't, they can make it see some of the keys, like Ford's one, I think. It's Ford's my key. You can't even turn the stereo over a certain volume. You can set that. You can set traction control. It must stay on so they can't do donuts and things. You can really control. Technology is not our issue. It's the willingness for us to deploy this wider. But you'd really question, sometimes why do we have that at a much wider? Also, I think there's an interesting one, and this is a bit wider. This is one of sort of Ken's musings. Alcohol interlocks, to me, are just a great example of a more socially conscious way of enforcing. So this is a device that's put into the car of a person, a recidivist drink driver. So somebody who's just, been caught drink driving, or they've done maybe caught a couple of times. There is the option to really hit them with these massive fines, take away their license, crush their vehicle. But what we find in a lot of cases is that sort of spirals somebody who's not handling life as well as possible, and we spiral them out further out of control. They aren't able to get to their job. They're unable to pick up their kids. They're now saddled with a fine that they'll never be able to pay. It causes other challenges. Like, if we can just control the particular risk-taking activity, then it's just more. It's a more social way to enforce. And as I mentioned before, the technology is not the issue. This is my government car, like 17 years ago, I think, and it was telling me what speed this device we were using. We were trialing these. It was telling me what speed zone I was in. It was beeping at me if I went over the speed zone. When I got back to my desk, I could download a report of exactly where I went over the speed limit. And of course, there were hardly any of those. Most of them were anomalies in terms of like a freeway on-ramp, and we put the speed sign down the end. So I'm accelerating. It technically thinks I'm back in a default speed, 50 kilometers an hour. And so, those sorts of things were interesting. But the point is that, like, we could have that in every car. It would not, and these days it's even easier because everybody's got a phone. We can basically track them. But it's more a acceptance in society of this sort of stuff, and the politics behind it, everything like that. The technology is not holding us back. So I put some dot points. When you download the PDFs, a bit of a summary of a few of those things. I'll pause there, Loretta, now, and I saw a few things flashing on my screen. I don't know what's happening.
All right, I'll tell you. That's fine. All right, first question is, I'm not sure if they still do driver's ed in American schools. Is this something that could be done in Australia?
Yeah, so there are different programs available around the world, and driver ed and those sorts of things. Different states in Australia have different programs of that. Certainly, we know you can get some advantage. A lot of classroom work to be done, and can be effective for young drivers. You don't need to get them in cars. If you're going to get them in cars, it's about basic handling and control. This is where your indicator is. This is the accelerator. This is the brake. Nothing needed in anything high speed. And in fact, that's where we get into the increased risk. But certainly there are programs across Australia and New Zealand in that space.
Couple more questions, if you know, or perhaps someone in the group might know that can answer. Have there been many studies into changing the age for obtaining a license? It would not be without challenges, but is there evidence to suggest some of the risks are related to age, hormones, independence, maturity, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. Well researched, well studied, and spot on. So the longer we can wait, the better. Males, we were theoretically 27 is a decent driving age. You can see the practical challenges with something like that, and that's where it often ends up in this sort of real challenging debate. I can try and dig out some of those studies. I worked with people who were doing those studies and really involved in that space. I was a bit more infrastructure focused, but I can try and dig some of that out. But great question.
And one more. Again, do you know if there's any research or whether specific or general deterrence is more effective? Example, are warning signs for speed cameras worth it or more effective long term?
Yeah, so lots of work on that, and you need a combination is the most effective. You need people to know that they could be fined anywhere, anytime, but you also need them to actually be fined. So yeah, you need both covert and overt speed operations. And yeah, the removal, it's effective to remove pre-warning of speed cameras as well to increase the general deterrence anywhere, anytime. But again, that's the theory. So there's some pretty good work out of Monash University Accident Research Centre on that, but it's the politics around that one. Okay. A few more from me, and then I've got to give Loretta time to take you through the learning management system. Safer vehicles. So vehicle technology is doing pretty well. There's some older ANCAP safety crash test pictures. And that idea that we're able to get people to buy safer cars through star rating and encourage manufacturers to make safer vehicles has been really successful. There's a frontal impact test. There's a side impact pole test where they slide the vehicle at a pole at a certain speed, and the dummy, the occupant of the vehicle, can't have a force so great that they get an acquired brain injury, which is level 3, Maze 3, I think it is. That's a massively serious brain injury. Like this is serious stuff. Okay. I'll give a prize if you can tell me what speed they do this crash test at. So slide the vehicle in at a certain speed that the dummy basically can't have a lifelong brain injury at the end of it. What speed do you think they do that test to get 5 stars? Okay, so Keely is our prize winner, 30. It's 32 kilometers an hour. So that's gives you an indication of some of the limitations of the vehicles when we're talking about physics and biomechanics of injury. 30 kilometers per hour, it's a 5-star, 32 kilometers an hour, it's a 5-star vehicle. So that's, but we are seeing vehicles crash into trees and power poles and like way faster than that. It's just extremely hard to engineer the side of the vehicle. They've done a better job with the front of the vehicle. That's a 64 kilometer per hour offset test, or 60 or 64. Crumple zones, airbags, seatbelts, all working for frontal impact. Side impact, yeah, there's a little airbag, but yeah, it's a challenge. There's pedestrian testing and cyclist testing nowadays where the bonnets are popping up, or there's airbags across the bonnet to try to protect road users outside the vehicle, which is great. We love seeing that sort of stuff coming into play. And of course, we're getting now more and more testing around autonomous emergency braking and the like. But when do we see the vehicles with no steering wheels and the like? Well, occasionally we see those puttering around the waterfront in different areas and the like, and you see the YouTube clips of San Francisco cars picking you up without a driver and these sort of things. We're a long way off actually seeing this in wide deployment. More and if we could get everything like this, we'd be significantly safer by a huge margin. There's no end of actual implementation challenges and little risks that pop up as a result of it. It could be hacking, it could be interface and with unique scenarios, system failures, and these sort of things. But generally, it would be incredibly safe. It's just going to take such a long time for this to everybody be comfortable with the technology and get it out there. B, for us to sort of roll the whole fleet over to actually get these saturated into the market. And then we've got still some other challenges there. So most jurisdictions are quite often doing studies as to whether it's a better investment to start just buying people's old vehicles and crushing them and incentivizing them to get new vehicles versus, changing infrastructure, upgrading, putting barriers in, doing other bits and pieces. And most of the time it's a bit of a combination, but most of the time the infrastructure still proves as a really good economic investment. But we'll see these vehicles with their automatic emergency braking coming in and doing some wonderful stuff. That one where the dummy's leg comes off, I would say it's still a success in the sense that vehicle slowed down before we saw a lower severity impact. So speeds, just reminding you in my last 5 minutes here, just some of the fundamentals of speed. So travel speed here and impact speed are not a linear relationship. So look here, 60 kilometers an hour. If somebody steps out from behind a vehicle or something, the driver needs some time to see that, to process it, and then to lift their leg, and then they start the braking, and they'll just touch it at 45 meters away. So let's go up 10 kilometers per hour to 70 kilometers per hour travel speed. They need that time to see, to look, to process the information, lift their foot up, and then they hit at 46 kilometers an hour. So not just 10 kilometers an hour more, it's not a linear relationship. And if you start to then overlay that with the speed injury curves that I showed at the start of this module, you get this really interesting relationship of, for fatal crashes, there's a fourth power relationship between fatal crashes and change in speed. So that just means small changes in speed result in big changes in fatal. Third power relationship for serious injury, it's about a second power relationship for all crashes. Really the principle out of that is if we can get small changes in speed, we can actually have reasonably big impacts on the highest end severity crashes. But speed is so challenging and controversial, and I spent a lot of my life managing speed zones and speed zoning guidelines and updating those and getting involved in it. It's so challenging, and that interface between the theory, the science, the engineering, the evidence, the public sentiment, and how you get that. And in some environments, we can be more successful than others. People are not 100% convinced that lowering speed limits would reduce crashes. I mean, there's a mountain of evidence to say it will, but they've got work to do there. Just public lowering the current speed limit would reduce the severity of an injury when a crash occurs. They're generally pretty in agreement of that. So that's an interesting one. So most understand the sort of basics of physics and biomechanics of injury. When I was updating the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 3, which is in speed and speed management, I was sort of popped this diagram out of it's out of Europe, but basically says, if we have a good understanding of the biomechanics of injury, how much force can be taken in certain crash scenarios with certain features in place, and you understand what your vehicle fleet is, and you understand your road, and you understand your road user, as long as you filter it through the appropriate speed, we have a safe transport system. Speed is the regulator. That's it. So, if you're deficient on your vehicles, or you're deficient on your roads, or you're deficient, on your people usually, but in different scenarios, as long as we're filtering through the appropriate speed, we are okay. We have a safe system. And we can alter travel speed through a number of ways. It can be through infrastructure and or speed limits. The most effective is if you can do it through the infrastructure and people slow down on their own accord because they're going over something, around something. So vertical deflection, horizontal deflection, these sort of things. That's just a really solid way to manage and regulate speed. Speed limits are effective. They're highly effective, but they can be flaunted quite easily, as you know. Explaining why a speed limit is in place can help with acceptance and compliance, such as school zones or particular vulnerable road users. So explaining that can be useful. And that vulnerable road user protecting vulnerable road users is generally well accepted. Now, I mean vulnerable here. So vulnerable road users in road safety is a term we often use for pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists. But also this one, I would go wider and I would take a more traditional discussion around vulnerable being kids or the elderly or injured or you know, these sorts of things as well. Variable speed zoning is becoming more and more a thing that we are going to see a lot more deployment of. It's an excellent technique. Strip shopping centers, for example, you know, one speed during certain activity, lowering it at others. We're doing this in regional environments at intersections where there's a vehicle coming towards the intersection. We can reduce speeds on other roads and these sorts of things. So lots of technology at play and some summary dot points in there. But just as a little window into what I'm going to cover next week, we're going to delve into risk and we're going to look at an expansion of a standard risk formula being likelihood times consequence to extract out exposure from likelihood. Exposure times likelihood times consequence. So how many people are exposed to a crash? Then what's the chance the crash actually happens? And then how bad is it going to be? And we'll unpack each of those and really say, okay, well, not only are we going to understand how do we analyze that, but what sort of things could we do to alter these? Altering exposure could be closing things off, like this is closing a level crossing off with a big mountain of dirt, you know, road closed sign, or complete separation. So, you know, the cyclists are not exposed to crashes with vehicles because it's just cyclists and pedestrians. Okay, they might be exposed to pedestrian cycle crashes, but likelihood, things to influence the likelihood, all of things like you know, line marking, audio tactile center line, edge line, wide center lines, sealed shoulders, lighting, alignment, traffic signals even, you know, these things, trying to stop crashes happening in the first place. But then saying, okay, well, if a crash happens, how do we make this less severe? By slowing people at conflict points, making them so there's less energy in the system, slowing the speeds, or maybe managing the energy with something like a barrier system so they hit it and they slowly dissipate their energy over time. But I'll cover all this again in more detail tomorrow. We'll pick it up from there. We'll start to analyze infrastructure. We'll start to get into those specific details. But I better stop there because I need to give Loretta time to show you the learning management system. And I'll have a look at questions and things and see if we get time to answer any of those. Otherwise, I'll deal with them next session.
Thank you. All right, just checking. Can you see my screen, Ken?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So I've seen that most of you have already logged in. A couple of people haven't. That's fine. I know we've got a couple of issues as well we're fixing. So once you get here, you log in, and it'll take you to a dashboard. So you will see the course that you're in today. If you've done other courses with us, then you will see those courses listed here. So just to quickly run through how this learning management system works and what you'll need to do. So just reading through the first few sections. So the welcome area gives you the course information with the agenda if you wanted to sort of, you know, have a quick look again at what the agenda entails. Obviously the link to the webinar. So if you can't find the email, you can jump in here and find that link for next time. Introduce yourselves. I know there was one person that did say hello as when I checked last. So Natalie, I think I'll give you a prize because no one else has said hello in that chat, but that's fine. You don't have to if you don't want to. A little bit of pre-course content if you wanted to watch that video. Resources is a really good section. So throughout the modules, Ken and any other presenter may refer to some of these resources and some fact sheets as well. So have a look at those. There's quite a few listed there, so they will help you get through the course. And then for today, there is module 1. Some videos in here which are quite handy to watch. So there's quite a few listed here. And then there's also the Mythbusters video in here as well. So if you wanted to have a look at that, I won't bring it up now. You can watch it in your own time. But most importantly, what you do need to do to complete this module is a quiz. So under tasks, every module you'll view sort of as the time comes. So module 2 will be available in the next couple of days for Thursday. But you do need to complete the quiz. So simply clicking on attempt quiz and answering all of the questions listed here. Most of them are multiple choice. And then once you've answered all of those questions, you click on finish attempt. And that's all you need to do for module 1. So that's pretty basic on that one. We'll go through feedback and certificates at the end of the course, so don't worry about that for now. But that's all you'll need to do for module 1. Ken, did you want to add anything?
No, just, yeah, have a go at that quiz. Reach out if you've got any challenges. You get a few attempts at it. Log in a few minutes early before next session for a chance to win a prize. Had a good question in there, again, from Penelope around sort of the utilization of signs to reduce speed, and they are effective. And if we go the other way of saying, well, we will only reduce speeds where we've got the compliance already down. I mean, we were reverting back to sort of 1970s thinking around using 85th percentile speed to set speed limits. And that's so well proven to be ridiculous as an approach. In fact, I put a case study at the end of the Austroads Guide Part 3 around that approach. So yeah, I think there's a lot of merit to simply signing it and bringing speeds down. We mightn't get 100% compliance, but we will get effectiveness. So yeah, happy to chat more to you about that if there are particular cases or challenges that you're going through there. Good. Enjoy the conversation discussion. It's ticking right onto time now. We like to make sure we finish on time. So we'll pick this up next session, log in a bit early. Thank you, Loretta, and thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you Thursday.